Hi, thanks for joining me on Jules FM. This can look different. This is part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Happy. We pick up here with Dr. Happy explaining his thoughts on whether we are all born with an understanding of what our intrinsic strengths are. Now, you might not know the answer to this because I don't, but you might have a better idea. Do you think we all, on some level, intrinsically or whatever, know what our strengths are from even young age, even though we're not consciously aware of it? Do you think we're all born with some gifts? When does that revelation come?
It's a great question. So yes and no. I think what we do know is what excites us and what energizes us, and I think we do know that from a very young age, because we enjoy stuff. But then there's a couple of problems that stop, or a couple of things that limit us from then utilizing that further on. One of them is that most of us don't have a language to think about or talk about these things, and that's one of the main reasons why. One of several reasons why I do recommend people do that VIA survey. If for nothing else, if all you get out of it is it gives us a vocabulary, so we can start talking about these things. Because people might have an inkling, but if you don't have words to put, if you don't have labels, then it just makes it harder. Whereas having a label or words or a vocabulary makes it a bit more tangible, which then makes it easier to do. So yes, I think we do know what kind of excites us and what energizes us, but if we don't have that language or vocabulary, it makes it hard. The other thing that our society gets a bit wrong, I think, there's many things our society gets wrong, but the other thing is that we often mistake, if something comes easily to us, we often discount it or underestimate it. And I think that's a pity, because if you have a natural strength, then by definition it sort of comes easily to you. But we then often denigrate that and saying, well, if I didn't work hard for it, it's not worth anything. Well, working hard for something is worth something, but just because it comes easily to you, just because you're naturally talented at this or you're using this, that shouldn't make it any less valuable. And I think, I think too often we discount our strengths because they come easily to us and because we enjoy them, and I think that's a really sad loss.
Yeah, and I think for some people that if it comes really easily, they think everyone can do it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any non-negotiables, habits or rituals that you use personally to maintain a positive psychology?
Yes, I do. I'm a big fan of habits, and you mentioned my audiobooks earlier. They're all based on the idea of habits. So there's habits for happiness and habits for happiness at work. So I do think that's really, really important. I will preface this, however, by saying that no one gets it perfect all the time. I certainly don't. So even though I've got all these rituals and routines, I still stuff up a lot of the time. I get it wrong. I forget things, and as we said at the very beginning, no one's perfect, so you're not going to get it right all the time. You're not going to be happy all the time. But yes, I try to do all of what we've talked about. So I try to exercise. I try to eat well. I prioritize sleep hygiene. I practice gratitude. I try to do all of the things I've spoken. I try to focus on my values, but I also. But the other part of that, as I said, is that I get it wrong all the time. And we will get it wrong a lot of the time, or some of the time. So what's then important, and possibly the most important kind of next step, is to practice a self-compassion. And that's the ability to say, okay, I've tried the best I can, I stuffed up, or I forgot, or I got it wrong, whatever. I'm not going to beat myself up on it now. And that's the big mistake I've made for many, many years, and a lot of us do make. And particularly for me, I say I should know better. I'm supposed to be the expert in this. Why don't I get it right all the time? Well, but for any of us, I think that's a mistake people make. They try to go to the gym and they go a few times, or they go for a few weeks, and then something happens and they don't go for a week, and then they beat themselves up. Oh, I'm stupid. I'm hopeless. I'm useless, and then they stop going. Well, what we want to try to do instead is say, well, it's okay. Again, I'm human. I got sick, or I got busy with work, or whatever. I'll try again tomorrow or next week, or whatever the case might be. And so I think developing the habits for happiness is in some ways relatively easy, or certainly easier. We kind of most of us know what we should do or could do. And so that's kind of almost the easy bit. The next bit is how you pick yourself up once you've fallen over, once you've made a mistake. And self-compassion is about treating yourself the way you treat a best friend, or your, a loved one or a child. Would you, if they made a mistake, would you say, "Oh, you're stupid, don't, give up, don't ever try again"? No, you probably say, "Look, it's okay, you made a mistake. Again, let's try again tomorrow." Give yourself sort of a bit of a pat on the back or a bit of a hug, literally or metaphorically. And then, that's all we can do, is do the best we can with what we've got and just keep trying, and as often as we need to.
Yeah. I know this was something you developed some time ago, but I was really fascinated by your the positive or the happiness diet. And I wondered, do you still teach that, and what kind of results have you got as well? Like, that was really, and if you'd explain it to start with as well.
Yeah, no, that's I haven't done a lot of work on that for a few years, to be honest, because I got busy with other stuff. But to go, so for those who aren't familiar, it was many years ago now.
Yeah.
I do it. So the happiness diet was in a sense a response to. I accidentally found myself working in an area with people who had various types of eating or weight disorders. So some were overweight, some were underweight, some had different food fetishes and whatever. And I became quite fascinated with this for quite a few years and developed the happiness diet in response to my interest in this. And it was basically a remedy for what I kind of discovered was this tyranny of when. So people would, say, "I'll be happy when I've lost weight, put on weight, made more money, got a better job," or whatever. And the idea was that if we say "I'll be happy when," we're just constantly putting off happiness. We're constantly deferring it. We never get there, really. And even if we do, we then just move the goalposts further and further, I suppose. So the answer to that was what I called the primacy of positivity. And that was about saying, well, if I put happiness first, real happiness, genuine happiness, if I put happiness first, well, then if I feel better about things, if I feel better about myself, I'm actually going to be more motivated to do what I need to do, whatever that might be, whether it's putting on weight, losing weight, eating better, whatever it might be. And there's some good research to support that in a number of areas. So the happiness diet came about as a specific version of the primacy of positivity, and we used that there was a TV documentary series that we did about that, which was fantastic. We got some great results, and then I did work on that for a number of years, but again drifted away from it when I got busy with other things. But basically the idea is it's not a diet in the sense of what you eat or don't eat. There's enough other people that are more expert in that, and again, to be perfectly honest, it's pretty simple, really. I mean, it's not that hard to just eat more real foods. I mean, I'm oversimplifying here and there. Again, there are nutritionists and dietitians who are expert in that, but there is a lot of expert advice about what to eat for a healthy diet. You don't need me to tell you, people don't need me to tell you. But what there isn't as much about is how to feel good about yourself, so you feel worthy of that. So you feel because if I feel like I'm a terrible person or a hopeless person or I'm not valued, well, then I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to eat. Why would I eat good foods if I'm not a good person, sort of thing. So this is about feeling like you're a good person first and foremost, so you will then do what you need to do. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we use the same kind of philosophy with kids at school. Like, if there's a student who's not doing well, first thing we look at is, like, are they feeling connected? Are they feeling part of the community? Like, their happiness, which is great. So in some aspects, we're getting that right, because we know that a child who feels comfortable, safe and connected is going to do better academically.
It sounds very similar. Yeah, exactly. And I think that could be applied to all areas of life. And so most of my work in recent years has really been positive psychology in the workplace, building a positive culture. And it's the same thing there. People say, or some people say, well, what does it matter if we're happy at work? Well, it matters because exactly like you just described, if employees feel safe, if they feel comfortable, if they feel connected, if they feel part of a community, if they feel like they're doing meaningful work, then they work better. They're more engaged, they're more discretionary effort, they're more helpful, etc. So to me, it's a no-brainer that happiness, or real happiness at work, real well-being at work, should be a priority for any organisation, and it is for some, but I think there's a lot of organisations that could do a lot more and would benefit a lot more, and it's the same in schools as well. So in schools there's so positive education is what's the branch in a sense of positive psychology that's been well established for quite a few years now. And in fact, Australia's been one of the leading forces in positive education around the world. So there's some really great examples of where that's been applied well and some of the results it's having.
Fantastic. You spend your life giving lots of advice. Have you ever been given any standout, memorable advice?
Oh, lots. Partly because I've been obsessed with this for pretty much all of my adult life, but I've been lucky enough to have some great mentors. I've been lucky enough to have some great therapists and coaches over the years. So I suppose I could answer that in lots of different ways. But what came to mind is the two things that have probably helped me most through my most difficult periods, to be honest. And one of the two things that and I still go through some very difficult, challenging phases, some dark phases, and the two things that I keep coming back to are one, this too shall pass. So particularly in my earlier days when I was suffering quite very severe depression, it wasn't just that I felt very depressed that was a problem, and that was bad enough, but I thought this would never end. I couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and that's part of depression. Anyone out there that's experienced, and not just depression, but other forms of mental health as well. It's not just the anxiety or the whatever, it's that we can't see a life beyond that. Yep. And so, but thankfully, one of the things I've learned through experience and been helped to, is this idea that this too shall pass. So now, I'm not perfect at it by any means, but I've become, one of the things I've got much better at is in my really bad phases is to say, okay, I know this is terrible and it feels terrible and I can't see any way beyond it now, but I do know, because it's happened to me before, that at some point the clouds will lift. And I can, more often than not, I can remind myself of that because it's happened, 450 times before, however many times before. Yeah. So that's really helpful. It doesn't necessarily just make things magically disappear, but more often than not, I'm able to remind myself and reassure myself that at some point, this afternoon, tomorrow, next week, whatever, the clouds will lift and things will hopefully get a bit easier. And then, just as importantly, the other thing is to remind myself. The other great piece of advice is that I'm not alone, because again, particularly back in my early days, that was one of the worst things. Was not just that I felt absolutely, desperately hopeless and helpless, was that I thought I was the only person in the world. And this is going back many, many years. So we didn't talk about things as much then. This is before. It's before Are You OK Day and before Beyond Blue and before a lot of the fantastic initiatives we've seen in the last decade or two. But back then, as absurd as it sort of seems, I thought I was the only person in the world because no one talked about it then. And I thought reaching out for help was a sign of weakness and all these horribly unhelpful things that I now know are not true. So thankfully, I have an incredibly loving and supporting wife. Thankfully, I have adult children now who are supportive and understanding. I have a couple of good friends and siblings who, and again, I'm still not as good at it as I'd like to be. Many of us still struggle with this, but again, I have got better at realizing I'm not alone. Well, and I mean, so that's in two. So one, I'm not alone in that I'm not the only person that suffers. Yep. And it's not that I want other people to suffer, but it is kind of reassuring to know that I'm not the only person in the world who's this messed up or whatever. It does make me feel a bit more, there's a comfort in knowing that this is a part of a human existence, I suppose, but also that there are people out there ready and willing to help if only I let them. And that's the problem, is not that they don't want to help, but it's that I often don't want to let them. But so that's those two things. There's a whole bunch of other stuff as well, but those two things particularly have helped me and continue to help me, particularly through the dark days.
I don't know. I imagine it must be very isolating, and I think that's probably a really natural response to feel like you're on your own, and also probably it's the last thing you want to do is invite people in, but. Obviously that's, a great strategy, and to know that there are so many resources out there.
Yeah, well, again, if anyone out there has experienced depression or anxiety, and I'm sure people have because we know how
Yeah.
common it is. One of the symptoms of depression is social withdrawal, is isolation. So we know that's a part of the illness in a sense. But it's not a very helpful one.
Yeah.
It's a natural response to sort of close in and shut yourself away. But again, I've got a little bit better at recognizing that I'm doing that, recognizing it's not helpful. And one of the things that's changed in a positive way so much in recent decades is that I can now go online, and there are some great communities of social support. I actually just wrote a post the other day about how social media gets a bad rap in a lot of ways, and there are some bad, definitely. There's a lot of bad about social media, and a lot of, I spend too much time on it, and many of us do, and there's a lot of bad things. But there's also a lot of good about it, and so if we can curate our feeds to some extent, and so we can join. There are communities and clubs and societies and where people support each other incredibly well, and it really is quite inspiring sometimes. So I can now, and then this didn't exist when I was younger, but I can now go online and go to certain pages or go to certain web pages and know that I can get good information or good support, or even just see other stories of people who have come out the other end. And so again, as bad as social media can be sometimes, there is a very positive aspect to it that I think it's definitely worth acknowledging.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure I put some links to some of those resources in the show notes as well. On a positive note, well, what gets you up in the mornings? What's one thing you genuinely look forward to in every day?
That's a great question. I don't know. Well, so when you asked that, it was the first thing that popped into mind was there's two, sort of my professional life and my personal life. In my professional life, I'm at a stage of my professional life where I've wound back a little bit. I still work. I still do a lot of speaking and writing, etc. But I'm also and have increasingly, probably almost for the last decade now, tried to give back. So quite a bit of my work now is unpaid work, and a lot of it's mentoring. Particularly young and emerging leaders in the mental health space, and also in some related areas that I'm passionate about, like the environment. So, and I've recently joined an advisory group for Lifeline Australia, which is so it's called the Lived Experience Advisory Group. So it's for those of us who have lived experience in mental health, feeding back into Lifeline's processes and policies and trying to help them develop those in a better way, guided by lived experience. So I guess it's those giving back, mentoring type activities that provide me an incredible amount of fulfillment and satisfaction. To know that I'm helping, or to think that I might be helping others in some way, is probably the driving force. And then as I have wound back a bit, and I've started to develop a few other things in my personal life, it's just doing more of, so this is apart from my family, I suppose, my wife and children, but it's spending more and more, as much time as I can in nature and bushwalking and hiking, and that's always been a passion, and now I'm able to spend a bit more time in the bush, which for me is very therapeutic. So that's it's good for me.
I think there's a whole study, isn't there, about how it can positively affect lots of people's psychologies to get that hit of nature.
Oh, 100%. So, Lost and Found, my latest book, the original working title for that. So when we pitched it to the publishers and when they accepted it, the original title was actually Get Dirty,
Yeah.
which I still love. And it was very much about nature therapy and adventure. So it was about getting dirty in a physical sense, getting out and getting in mud. But it was also about getting dirty in a sort of psychological sense, which is about about uncertainty and the unknown. And so the publishers actually, we signed the contract with that, but then when it got to the marketing department, they got a bit anxious that people might misinterpret it. So unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, so we went back to the drawing board and changed it to Lost and Found, which I still really love. I love the title of that, and I think it was a good way in a sense because it actually broadened the scope of the book. So I don't regret it at all. But there is in Lost and Found, there's a strong theme of nature therapy, adventure therapy, getting outdoors, and look, there's no doubt that too many of us spend too much time doing what we're doing now, staring at screens, which is okay. Again, it's a necessary part of modern life, but almost all of us would benefit from getting outside. And it doesn't have to be bushwalking and hiking and camping like I do. Just get down to your local park, get down to your local beach, whatever. Just spending more time outdoors, ideally amongst green or blue, depending on whether you're near the coast, is undoubtedly helpful and healthy for almost all of us.
Makes me feel calm and relaxed just thinking about it. Final question is there something I haven't asked that you would like to share with listeners?
I think we've covered pretty much everything. So I think it's been some great questions, a great interview. It's been a great chat. Thank you. I suppose I'd go back to the idea, well, maybe just not new, but to recap a couple of things we have talked about, which is that one, it's not realistic to be happy all the time. It is a good thing to strive towards health and happiness and flourishing for sure. But we've got to be realistic about it. And all of us, in some way or other, will experience those so-called negative emotions like stress, depression, anxiety. These are normal parts of being, especially a caring human being in a messy world. And so, so we do need to be realistic about that. We do need to accept that that's a normal part of life. And as I briefly touched on, the practice of self-compassion, so that when we do, lose our temper, when we do, drop the ball and mess up and get irritated or whatever, to be kind to ourselves, and others, and just get back and try your best again in the next minute or hour or day or whatever it might be. So, putting all of that, if you can put all of that together, hopefully you'll be doing pretty well.
Oh, thank you. It's such good parting wisdom to leave us with. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been fantastic, and I'm sure so many people will get so much out of this. So thank you again.
Thanks for your kind words, and thanks for having me.
I hope you got something out of this conversation with Dr. Happy. Lots of great reminders about what's important in life. If you haven't listened to part 1, check it out. It's packed with helpful advice on ways to live a more fulfilled life. If this conversation resonated, especially if you're navigating anxiety, low mood, or a season that feels heavy, you're not alone. There is support, and there's people out there and communities who really want to help. Thank you for joining me again today. And however you're finding your way right now, this can look different.